Welcome, Power fans. I am back to cover episode 2 of the final season of Power Ghosts. Just to remind you guys before we start off, make sure you like and subscribe. I'll be covering every single episode, uh, airing right after the episode airs every Friday night. And I think one of the big themes this episode was really the idea of the Phoenix. Even Tariq himself mentioned that when he decided to tell Braden that they need to get back in the game. He talked about the phoenix rising from the ashes, which he had learned in class. The whole idea of the cyclical nature of life, rebirth, death. And we're seeing the children mimicking pretty much everything that their parents did. We see that going on with Monet and the regret that she's having with her children. And we're seeing Tariq pretty much embracing the worst of his ego. He's feeling that he can make no mistakes at this point, and we know it's going to lead to some big downfall at the end of the season. So, starting off, this whole idea of Tariq being out of the game, that was a big thing with this episode. They're trying to move straight. They're regular college kids now. They're kind of pariahs on the campus now for everything that they've been doing. Previously, I don't even know how Tariq is allowed back on campus. We had a kid that drowned in the pool. We just had a cop that got killed on campus, and Tariq is surrounding all of it. And he's still back on the campus, working 3 jobs now, making minimum wage, $11 an hour. He only lasts maybe a week of doing this, and he decides, I've had enough. I think the breaking point was that, and also seeing his mother, Tasha, working at, this bootleg Target. I think it was called Shop Depot was the name of it, but she had kind of the Target vest on, and she's being hampered by an old creepy man. Tariq has had enough. He's like, I need to, in his way, he's phrasing it as, I need to get back in the game to make money to protect his family. That's the way he's trying to frame it in his mind, when really he just wants what Ghost wants. He wants complete power and control. He doesn't want to be subordinate to anyone. And Braden is right on the bandwagon now because he's ostracized from his family. Apparently, after that big massacre they had at the airport, he's not afraid of shooting a gun and killing anybody now. So he's willing to get back in the game at the cost of his life, and, knowing that Noma, once she gets word of it, they're going to be back in the crosshairs. So one of the big things also is that now Tariq is tied back in with Monet. They had the big conversation at the end of the episode where Monet is still trying to find out who killed her. She's even now suspicious of Kane at this point. It's funny, she has really no suspicion of Diana and Drew when they were the ones that were so angry at her for killing Lorenzo, and she has not been able to make that connection yet. So she's all focused on Kane, and now Tariq mentions, you know, um, Tommy's mother. So that gets Kate. So that gets her mixed up back in everything. And if we remember, Diana impersonated Monet to drop off that letter that ended up getting back to Tasha. And she was the one that shot Monet. So we know that Tariq is going to protect his mom. He's not going to implicate her any way in this situation. So we can expect Tariq now to basically run interference. He's going to push Monet in other directions. The question is where, which direction best benefits Tariq. At first, I thought maybe he wants to get rid of one of the Tejada kids. I think Drew is the main one that needs to go. He would be my first target. And when I interviewed Obi last season, he mentioned Drew was the first one he would try and take out too, because Drew is so combustible and emotional. But in this case, if I'm Tariq, if I know getting back in the game is going to put me in the crosshairs of Noma, I'm going to direct Monet to look at Noma as the one that shot her. So I'm going to start sowing those seeds of discontent to get her focused on Noma. And if he can weaken Noma's empire even further, that leaves a pathway for him to get back in the game, solidify, connect, and possibly usurp her position, especially now because he also knows that Obi is in his back pocket, at least for now. We'll see what Carter does with that. But at least for now, Obi is indebted to him and is leading more towards his way of thinking as opposed to Noma, especially because Noma is pushing him out further and further because she's distrusting him as well. So for the next couple episodes, I think we can look to Tariq to push Monet in Noma's direction as the person that actually shot her, which is going to be very, very interesting. On the flip side, I think the other thing we have to look at is Effie's coming up in the game now. She has a direct line with the Russians, and they said point blank, in front of Kane that we only want to deal with Effie going forward. Now, keep in mind, not just them having Effie's ear, but also they're getting the gun shipments directly from Noma. So Noma's basically arming her rival to the teeth. So at some point, I think we need to look at where Effie's loyalties are going to lie because we know she's ambitious. She's shown that before, but she made mistakes before that made her fall out with Tariq. But at this stage, if she's learning under the Russians, has them possibly backing her, we know the Russians don't completely trust Noma at this point, and we know they hate the Tejadas. That leaves also a pathway for Effie, if she plays it right, to possibly also getting to Noma's position if she chooses to because I don't think she really has any loyalties to Noma, and she doesn't want to be under Noma's thumb for too long if she can get out of that. So now she has the Russians backing her. That leaves a pathway for her to also be a thorn in Noma's side. And I think overall, Noma's characterization this season is very, very interesting. When we first saw her last season, very calm, very collected, not an emotional person. All of that is slowly unraveling. I think she's been Americanized too much, where at this point, she's picking up all of our bad habits, so to speak. So, really, Obi has always been the person that she can trust. Now she's pushing him away and is looking at people like Effie and Kane, thinking that, well, they'll never betray me. They're always going to be under me and listen to me. And I think she also underestimates their intelligence. And I think the biggest sign that Noma is slipping is the point where when you cross her, you have to pay. Physically, you have to pay. When there was a hint that Obi was not all the way on board, what did she do? She slashed his face. In this case, all Kane had to do was throw one of her favorite phrases back at her, and she's putting her knife away. And she wants to hear what he has to say. All of a sudden now she's impressed with his moxie. She's impressed with Effie's moxie. So now she's getting a little too soft. And this is going to make her vulnerable as the season goes on. Initially I was looking at Obi as the main one from our organization that's in the most peril of not making it through the season. But I think Noma as well. I think like all the other cartel kingpins, they get a little too arrogant and they get a little too comfortable. We've seen it with Lobos. We've seen it with all of them. And I think it's going to happen with Noma as well. She should know better, but without her Europe connect and the power that's behind that, she's getting a little too fractured. And I don't think she's seeing the wave coming as far as the young guns coming for her position. So I think Noma's in a lot of peril going forward. I think one of the biggest missteps we had this season is I wasn't really crazy about the characterization we had with Agent Carter, Michael Ealy's character. With this being the last season, I think they have to move very quickly with him, and they have to show very quickly why he's a danger, why he can be a threat to not just Tariq, but everybody on the show, Monet, Noma. Why is he so important? What makes him so different from all the other cops that have been pretty much cannon fodder from the original Power to this Power? I'm talking about Greg, Donovan, even Angela. They get killed at the drop of a dime. Angela's cousin Junior. They're all getting taken out. So what makes Agent Carter different? And so far, we really haven't seen that difference. We know that he's a good officer because obviously he busted the Russians connect at the beginning of the episode. But for him to be dangerous, he has to be willing to work outside the lines. And I think he also has to have a murderous streak, which I thought that's what they were hinting at by his wife getting killed at the hospital, by dealers. But right now he's playing it straight. He goes to Davis with a proposition about, I got connections with the board that can make sure you don't get disbarred. He's going up to Obi, trying to put the pressure on him and interrogate him. So I wanted this episode to show why he's an actual deadly character, and we haven't seen that yet. I know it's still early, but this is the last season and we have two parts, so I think they still need to move quickly. So hopefully in the next two episodes, I want to see him take out somebody important. That to me will show that Agent Carter is a serious threat to Tariq. Now, who should he take out? We saw Two-Bit come back, so maybe that's an easy out for him. I think the Tejadas, I'm focusing back on them. There's just too many of them around. They gotta trim the fat a little bit and take out a few of them, at least one. So I wouldn't mind Agent Carter taking out Drew some type of way. I think Diana's going to be here for a little while because of the pregnancy, so we got to see that plot develop. Wouldn't want to see Kane go too quick because he's a good antagonist, so we need to keep him around. So unfortunately, that leaves Drew. Sorry, Drew. Your lovers are gone. You're just kind of taking up space at this point. You really should have died in the first episode. We saw how deadly Tariq is in close combat with his gun when he took out Angela's nephew. But all of a sudden, he's not able to shoot straight when Drew was right in front of him in the first episode. So, unfortunately, I think the Tejadas have a little bit more plot armor until maybe the season finale of part one. But I'd like to see Drew at least get taken out in the next couple episodes. But Agent Carter needs to do something to really establish his threat in the next episode or two. And we know Michael Ealy works best when he's playing unhinged characters. So, we see the anger that he has for Tariq and people like him, but I want to see him hit that edge and be able to play both sides. That to me is going to make him the antagonist that we need for this final season. As far as the other highlights of this episode, of course, I mentioned Tasha working at the shop depot, her little Target get up, that was hilarious. Also, Tariq's facial expressions. So go back and watch the episodes when he's looking at his mom and looking at the boss that's putting the moves on her, touching her, and ordering her around. Tariq is completely disgusted. Remember where he comes from. He's a kid of privilege on both sides of the game. So he is not used to this whole 9 to 5 thing. My mom having to slave all day and having nothing to show for it. So he was completely disgusted. That was hilarious to see. Also, the flashback scenes with Monet kind of gave us a little bit of that Raising Kanan flavor. I thought those were very, very interesting in showing how those little decisions of not wanting to do things the right way pretty much put her children down this path, pretty much ended up putting her in a position where she had to kill her children's father, going behind his back and deciding to get extra weight to put out in the streets. Basically took them down the path where they are now, where her kids don't trust her. They just look at her as a roadblock to their ambition, and there's no turning back at this point. It's way too late to try and reverse that. Um, I did think about what would happen if Monet actually finds out that Drew and Diana were the ones that put the mechanisms in place for her to get shot. Would that murderous rage return to her? Because remember, last season, besides Lorenzo, at a couple points she was willing to kill Kane as well. Can she have that anger or return to that anger when she finds out, if she were to find out that Drew and Diana set her up? I think at this point she's so remorseful. I can't see her going back down that road. I think she'd be more heartbroken than anything. But, you know, you can never put anything past Monet. She's the one person that when she gets angry, she's pretty unpredictable. So I want to see where her arc goes. She's very, very remorseful and everything now, walking around with one kidney, still trying to make deals and everything, almost mess up that deal completely with Noma and the Russians. So we'll see where Monet's path goes from here. But this thing with Diana's baby, I want to see how that changes Tariq once he gets that news. I think Tariq is the father, right? I don't think there's been anybody else in the picture besides maybe the who was the boyfriend that Diana kicked to the curb? I think that was too long ago, so it can't be him. Has to be Tariq. So how Tariq handles this news of becoming a father, that's going to be very interesting. It'll be funny how they play this because Tariq is already, self-absorbed. The whole idea of raising a family, does that change his hustle mentality? Does that make it worse? That'll be interesting to see. Does he tell his mother? What's his mother's feedback? That's going to be a whole big mess. And what if Monet runs into a rage, finds out about, Diana's plot, and kills Diana before knowing about the pregnancy. What does that do to Tariq's mindset? Does that drive him into a more murderous rage? And I think we can expect one last thing, Tommy showing up, now that Kate's name has been mentioned, and, some type of way Monet is going to interrogate her to find out, what she knew about that letter that she received. Um, I think at that point, if Monet takes it too far and possibly kills Kate, even though Tommy hates her to a degree, that's still his mother, that's going to bring him back into town. I think we can expect Tommy at some point to show up this season. I think everybody has to come back for this final season. And one thing I want to say with these flashbacks that we got the ghosts of Lorenzo and Mecca in the first episode, and also the flashbacks this episode. I haven't heard anything, um, but just my personal feeling, it would not surprise me for Ghost to show up, and if not in one of these flashbacks, in a spirit sequence with his son, because that's like the big sequence that we've been waiting for, that face to face where the son confronts, the ghosts of James, and they have it out at some point. Because Tariq has talked to the ghost of Canaan before, but not his own dad. I think that we need to see that before the season is over with. I don't know if it happens if they, if Tariq dies and they have this in the spiritual world, or if Tariq is dying and he sees his father, but they have to have some type of meaning in the minds like that. I think that's the big scene that we need to conclude this series. I know some people have speculated about Ghost not being dead. I think that's just too far of a bridge, even for Power to do. Not that I wouldn't welcome it if they did it. I'm like, we're going to go into the fuckery. We might as well go completely deep end. But I think it would be better to have a spirit representation of James St. Patrick instead of the actual coming from the grave. I think that's too hard of a logic jump to have that make sense. But anyway, let me conclude. That is the second episode entitled To Thine Own Self. I think we're off to a good start, but I want to see a stronger edge from Agent Carter as we go along in the season. He needs to be a strong antagonist to really bring the season all together and to make it a worthwhile ending to the Power Book 2 saga. So I will be back next week to cover episode 3. Make sure to turn your notifications on. These reviews will be coming right after the episode airs Friday night. But if you are one of those early birds, you can come on here on YouTube and it'll be available likely right at about 1 o'clock when you have the midnight premiere. So thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.